Everyone hear us okay? In the chat, you can, thank you, Alyssa. If you could please introduce yourself in the chat. Super appreciative. And I am going to start my share, so. I have progressives now, so I cannot do anything. Oh my gosh. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Use the
Can you hear us?
yeah, gotta start the video. Start the video and then click the Panopticon
Oh, sorry.
nation.
We lost about 30 people in that.
Okay, audio is on.
Great.
Great.
Oh, let me hear you.
Oh, you can see me. You don't want to see me, right? You see me, Jenny?
And then there should be
And I have to kind of.
it's USB coming through. Oh,
That's
are
fine.
you see? Or are you regular?
Do- Okay, let's. I only have one USB-C.
Do you have a USB that has the adapter on it so you can just pull it out?
On my USB screen.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
There you go.
Hey, we're back.
Apologies, everybody. Shall we pin the?
Okay, once again, I'd like to thank ISCS for hosting us in this conference room, and we now have a new computer, so hopefully everything is going to work out well. I'll just ask the panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Linda and go this way, whatever way that is.
Hi, my name is Linda O'Keefe. I am the chair of art at Stony Brook University. My field of research is acoustic ecology and the ethics of gene editing for climate adaptation.
Thanks. I'm Professor Rebecca Fiebrink. I'm from the Creative Computing Institute at University of the Arts London. And since about 2007 or so, my research has really focused on how AI can be used by creative people to do creative things.
Hi, I'm Professor Mick Grierson, and I'm research leader at the Creative Computing Institute, which we set up in 2018 at the University of the Arts London. Before then, I was with Phoenix and Rebecca at Goldsmiths for a long time, where we did exactly the kind of work that Rebecca was just talking about as much as we could.
Hi, I'm Dr. Phoenix Perry. I am an artist and educator. I make games and immersive experiences and AI tools. I helped found the CCI with Nick and Rebecca, and I have a tool I'm going to talk about today called Interactimel, which lets you program interactive machine learning without having to be able to program.
Great, so we have a set of questions and I'm going to direct it to each of our panelists, and then anybody can jump in after that. So hopefully we will prevent mass chaos. So our first question is for Phoenix. How is generative AI transforming traditional teaching methods in your specific field of art?
I think that what we're finding is that the generative AI is being used in a lot of ways by our students that are helping them understand some of the problem space. I found that my students, when I told them and asked them how they were using it in much more creative ways than people were expecting. Generally, people were expecting it to like help them cheat or whatever, but what they were actually doing was using it to help them understand the ideas that we were teaching. So one of my students, for example, asked if ChatGPT could explain how to program an algorithm using metaphor, and that helped her understand the idea in a lot more comprehensive way, program the algorithm that she was learning. It was one of your algorithms, actually, coding too. And it was helpful for them to do that. And I also think it's empowering a lot of multilinguistic classrooms where international students come and maybe don't have the best grasp of the language in their host country, and they're able to use something like ChatGPT or Claude or any of the other LLMs to be able to say, okay, say it in my language that I am used to speaking, in the language of my host country, and then they can see the difference and learn new vocabulary. And I think that's really useful and really helpful. And the other thing we found is it's really helping a lot of our students who have different learning disabilities understand how to write in a more comprehensive way, because they're seeing their thoughts then kind of reordered and fed back to them, and they're using it in a conversational way. I have 3 students who had learning disabilities use it in that way last year, and they really found it useful for reordering and restructuring their sentences. And I thought that was really interesting. And beyond that, they're making really cool art, which I'm loving. Not using any of the big generative tools, but using more open source and equitable tools, things like Pick2Pix or our own tools, or Rebecca's tool, Weaponator, Mix Project, RapidLib. They're using these small, more creative systems in fun and inspiring ways.
Anyone want to add anything to Phoenix's response?
I think that I came across something amazing in an interview just last week when I was interviewing for a research fellow. And we'd had an application which the practice component of the application was really amazing. But the skills on the CV, there were nothing like we would normally expect. And so I thought, you know what, I just want to meet this person. So we invited them for an interview, not to waste their time, but just to find out what's going on. And they'd done the whole thing with ChatGPT. I said, how did you do this, without knowing how to program? They said they just got ChatGPT to help them and spent the whole time trying to bug fix the code. And I just thought to myself, yeah, so ChatGPT, it won't get it right, so you've got to fight with it. But that's the same thing you've got to do anyway, right, in this company. And I was just super impressed. So I think this particular student was at the London College of Fashion. And so they'd never done any technical work before. They just wanted to do installations. And that felt really positive to me because it's her enthusiasm and just kind of can-do approach and just willingness to stay up all night until it worked, which I just thought was really laudable. So yeah, I think that there's a really transformational effect that these technologies can have on people who wouldn't have necessarily had access to this kind of skills capability before.
Yeah, it's leveling up the YouTube tutorial self-education for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an interesting, sorry, Meg, I had a really interesting student compare it to some of the examples in Dan Schiffman's learning processing book, where Dan has fill in the blanks, where you have to go in when you're learning to code and fill in the blanks. And I feel like ChatGPT gives enough of that frame that people have to like fill in the blank. So they actually end up having to learn way more than they'd expect to debug it.
Yeah,
That debugging
that totally
is
is.
teaching them how to code.
Yeah,
And
that's it.
it's a new way to learn to program.
Our next question is for Mick. Can AI be a tool for enhancing creativity, or does it risk diminishing the value of human artistry?
This is a great question because I think that the answer is kind of yes to both things. I suppose, although I mean, it's hard for me to be, I'm not going to claim to know the future, but it seems to me that, let's take the first case. It's definitely really good as a tool for enhancing creativity if you use it in a creative way. And I think the kinds of tools, actually, not just using tools, but making tools, the kind of tool making that artists do generally, that's really accelerating, partly because with AI. And I think that the engagement with the technical process, just like we were just talking about, that's incredibly positive. So yeah, I do think people who are willing to work with the tool will make better tools for their own art than any of the tools that companies will make. I think that whole DIY approach is still the thing, which I think that's going to become much more exciting and be more exciting. But yeah, sure, I think the other thing about diminishing creativity, I don't want to knock tools like Photoshop, but I don't like to teach them. And it's because I feel like the algorithms create generic outputs, when you've got a fixed technology which works in a certain way, then it tends to encourage people to apply presets. And that's kind of one of the problems with getting students to do advanced work, is they never get there because they're too busy applying a preset. And so I feel like, yeah, you're going to get a massive amount of low quality to average quality work. But in a way, I think that's okay. I think it's okay. And maybe people will think that work is good, and I think that's okay as well. I just think it's unavoidable. I'm not worried about it in that I don't think it's going to be everything. The scale of it might be a problem, but you know what? There's always been masses and masses of average stuff. And I just think it's the same, and I'm more interested in the fact that, yes, there's this incredibly exciting creative potential. So I think I'm basically on the utopian positivist side, more than I would like to be, but I am.
Anyone want to be less utopian or be cheerleader for the utopian positivist?
I've got more to say. I don't think I'm utopian. I don't think I'm here to like tell Mick that I disagree with anything he said. I think, I will say there's a lot of risks with AI. There's a lot of, changes that I think we're expecting to see, and not all of them are going to be good. But one of the things that I really emphasize in my own teaching, and something that really does drive most of my research, is this belief that if we think about AI as, it's really just a set of computational tools for finding patterns in data and working with those patterns, whether that's making predictions or whether that's generating new data that follows the same patterns. AI isn't ChatGPT. AI isn't Midjourney. Yes, those things are very popular examples of what AI might do, but AI is all sorts of other things as well. The potential to keep expanding what we can do and what our students can do with AI is huge. And I think, in a lot of my own work, I see a number of ways that AI can enhance creativity beyond the sorts of things that Phoenix and Mick have already said. So, yes, for instance, there's this capability of systems that might allow you to type in text and get media. There's a capability for that to lower the barrier to entry for people who might not be Photoshop experts or might not be programmers. And that's, exciting, but totally not the end of the story. A lot of the tools that we've made at the Creative Computing Institute allow people to make their own models from their own data. My first work in this area was in the area of helping people make new musical instruments, where folks wanted to move and use sensors that captured aspects of those movements and then translate those movements to sound. And machine learning is a great set of tools to allow people to make those mappings from movement to sound without having to be a programmer and to do it really effectively. And in fact, there's all sorts of other applications that we have explored in this, including, Phoenix mentioned this tool called InteractML, where we're helping people build VR experiences and interactions more easily. As another example, there's tools, I guess, we can think about the ways that people engage in the creative process when they're using machine learning. It's not just about what kinds of things can I create and how quickly can I create them, but what is my role in that process as a creator? And I think, we're seeing in many examples of AI artists' work, it's not about, hey, I'm going to design which pixels are which color at the end of the day. I might be more from a standpoint of acting as a curator, or some of the musicians that I've worked with, talk about AI as a really exciting tool because when it does surprising things, it might give you new sounds that you've never imagined and didn't think of, or it might give you new images that you haven't imagined. And you're in this position of being inspired by the technology as you use it. It doesn't mean it's in charge. It doesn't mean it's autonomously intelligent, but you are in a different creative position instead of pretending that you have this creative genius idea and the computer just needs to follow your instructions. You might be in a messier, more dynamic kind of creative context. And I find that really exciting. There's a lot of possibilities there. Yeah.
So I swear this happened. On the chat, we see how do you address the ethical issues? And question number 3 for Linda. What ethical considerations should educators consider when integrating AI into art curriculum? So evidently this is a very hot topic for people. And Linda, I know you've done a little study on this, yeah?
Well, I've done work in the area of ethics and technology. So although I work with AI somewhat, I'm not at all in the realm of these amazing folks in the room. I touch on it, I'm mostly working with sound and technology. But in thinking about incorporating any new technology or new concepts into a curriculum, we do have to consider the ideas of ethics, especially with new technologies, the ethics of access, the ethics of bias, right? Who's designing and who's the user? Those questions about who is it for, what's its purpose? And so I think when it comes to thinking about the art curriculum, interestingly enough, within most universities, as probably everybody here has noted, we're constantly hearing this refrain from senior management about the risks of AI. As someone said here earlier, cheating, that our students are going to kind of dumb down the learning process. And so I guess from an ethical standpoint, in thinking about, well, how does this enhance learning, right? And whose learning is it enhancing? These are kinds of the questions that we have to think about, the ethical responsibility we have as artists and educators for our curriculum. And we can't ignore the fact that students are using this technology, whether or not it's part of our curriculum. So it's how do we have a conversation anyway about it? How as a faculty do we start thinking about talking to students about it and how they're using it and why they're using it? And already we have many students in the Department of Art who are working with AI and building amazing works that are both questioning the technology and using it to question everyday belief systems or political issues, you know, racial, gender questions. They're using these technologies to actually tackle these issues, realizing that the technologies themselves are inherently inundated with those issues. So I think it's having the confidence within an art school to say, how do we talk about it? Especially if we ourselves don't understand the technology that well. How do we gain an understanding of it so that we can approach that really difficult topic of the ethical consideration of these technologies?
Yeah, if you go back far enough, writing in education is considered cheating. So there are words from that. So it's every new technology is questioned and then it is adopted. So I don't think that this is any different. I think just the pace of change and adoption is radically different from anything we've seen before. And even as sort of experts in AI and the arts, I think the rapid evolution since 2019 has astonished us all, and we couldn't have predicted it, even being in this space.
But I also think that I don't think we should be reactive to it. We should sort of engage with it and be reflective with it, rather than reactive, which I feel that sense of scaremongering by the media, I don't think it's not helping the conversation about how we should engage with this technology critically in everyday conversations, because it's, you know, it's being used.
And I think it's about equipping students to participate in those conversations as well. There's, you know, we don't have a monolithic ethical standpoint on this. It's really complicated. We want our students to be part of that conversation and to be contributors to it.
So we've talked a little bit about AI in the school and the curriculum, but what about in the community? So Phoenix, I know you and Linda both do a lot of work with community engagement. How are you approaching that question?
Linda, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. You know, so a lot of the work that I've been doing over the past 12 years are about engaging communities with the influx of new types of technology coming into their environments, and how is that impacting on them? What conversations are being had with them about this technology in relation to their everyday lives? So a recent project I did with the Non-Random Art Collective was on the emergence of gene editing for climate adaptation, right? And I don't know if anybody recently saw the New York Times article about they're already doing that in Australia. They've already begun to look at genetically altering animals in Australia for climate adaptation. And so what we've done as a collective is we've brought communities of interest together to talk about how we feel about who makes the decision on these ideas, and how do we broaden inputs from different communities about these decisions of new technologies coming in that are going to have a radical impact on our ecosystems, on our bodies, on our worlds. And to look at the communities who are most often always excluded from those conversations. And I think that's the really important point about having questions about communities about technologies such as AI, is who is not being included in those discussions.
And who is not being represented in the
And
data.
and who is not part of design, right? Coming back to that idea, user designer, you know, and so that's sort of my thinking about how you try to look at who should be involved in discussions about new technologies. It's primarily those who are actually not part of the discussions and should be, because they may be the most affected by an emerging technology coming into our world.
So I have a completely different way of thinking about this stuff. I think AI is way too broad of a term to really effectively address it in terms of working with artists and creative expression. I think that when I run workshops on this stuff, I tend to really target what it is I'm thinking about, because AI is a massive thing that can include everything from like genetic algorithms all the way through to you know, machine learning. And when I say AI like this, it's just too broad for me to answer the question in any effective way. What I have been working on recently and been most interested in is I've been reading a lot of economic theory, and I've been trying to wrap my head around economies of data and what it looks like when you build data sets from a community-driven effort. And I'm most fascinated in looking at how artists build and craft and curate their own data sets to inherently have authorial intent. And I'm interested in how to curate that and also how to take things we know from like Eleanor Ostrom's work and take her idea around property management and apply it to data commons. Like, what does it look like when we have a queer data commons? Can you queer a data set? Can you have a disability, led design effort in data creation? What does that look like? What does, disability-led AI design entail? These are the questions I'm more interested in thinking about because they're more targeted, more focused. So like, I could also have this whole conversation around genetic algorithms and breeding algorithms, we could be here all day. And I think that that's the thing that we forget is that AI is massive. It includes everything from like robotics and robots learning to navigate to doors all the way through to if you look at the general definition of AI, it includes basic algorithmic ideas like loops. So it's a very deep topic. So I would say to address this, we need to be narrow. We need to think about how to narrow.
Yeah, speaking of being narrow, I saw a quick anybody had somebody was like more open source suggestions, please. So maybe if each of you could name a tool that is open source that you enjoy using and why, maybe start over with Phoenix.
My own. I may have made my own tool to do this with Rebecca. It's built off, to not leave Mick out of the picture, it's built off a library called RapidLib that Mick designed ages ago, and we're using Mick's C++ library, and we've essentially wrapped it to be inside Unreal and Unity. The Unity version's out. If you go to the GitHub, y'all don't download the Unity version, it's dead. But the Unreal version on the Epic Megastore is awesome. We have over 60,000 users last I looked, but we get about 2,000 users new a month still. It lets you.
That tool is InteractML.
You'll see it if you come to the talk, you'll see it in my slides later. But it's really cool because it lets you do gesture recognition in VR. So like if you've got like a racing game, for example, and you want it to feel a lot more organic, you can have gestures for like driving without having a steering wheel. Or if you've got like a little wizarding world, you can have somebody create a spell gesture that goes to a set of mechanics in the game. So I enjoy working with my own tool. How about you, Mick?
Yeah, anyone can provide that. Anyone can use that tool. It works in the Unreal Engine. Unity.
No programming required. It's absolutely in blueprints. It's 3 nodes. It's really easy put together. InteractML, and then
right on the board too, Phoenix.
Nice. Yeah, go for it.
Marker. Okay, this is gonna have to be very big.
Forwards.
Can be invisible.
And
Well, then Rose can
Backwards.
type it in the chat.
act. L, then Nator. This is Rebecca's.
Thanks, Nicole.
Mick, you got anything you want me to write up?
No, that's all right.
Oh, come on.
No.
All right,
Seriously?
well, you're up
Yeah.
next, Mick, so.
I mean, there are a bunch of tools, but I think that lately, this issue about community focus, I've been trying to customize an open source large language model with a community of disabled artists, learning disabled and autistic artists in Southeast London. With the health, with the adult daycare services team in Elton, which is a kind of a part of Southeast London, which is a bit hard to get to, that most people haven't heard of. And the idea behind that is, can we get together and use physical devices to work with people who have, sometimes they're non-verbal, sometimes they don't have good physical mobility, sometimes they have autism, sometimes they have other types of cognitive disabilities, but can we find a way to work together to retrain a large language model? And this is done, I guess, predominantly with tools like Llama, which someone in the chat has already mentioned. I think that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of open source large language models on the internet, and also similarly generative models. So there's this kind of almost a punk thing going on, which I think is really exciting, where, and there's I think it's causing a lot of debate, and there are people who don't really want to talk about it because I think they're worried about what it could really mean. But if you can get the right kind of interfaces and the right kind of design, just as you're talking about, you know, I think then you could allow people or help people to automate anything they want to automate, with caveats, right? Because some of these systems are spectacularly bad, really, really important stuff. But yeah, I would just say that, I think that with the more, with the kinds of AI that people get overexcited about at the moment, these kind of text prediction systems, I really like the idea of people being able to make their own versions. And we've been working really hard to try and get that to work. And you can do it. So we did design totally customized AI with this group. And they basically said what it had to do. And it would decode letters they were sent from the local authority and explain them in different ways. And if people didn't understand it, they could use a switch system and it would then re-describe it. And it would take photographs of drawings that they'd made and then interpret them and say, is this right? And they could say yes or no. And we found that was really impactful. So yeah, I think that it's all to play for. You could do some amazing things. And I think you just got to, everyone's just got to go and customize.
Yeah. Rebecca, any favorite open source tool at the moment?
Nothing to add.
To interactive ML and webinator. I have tiny bit played with interactive ML, but full disclosure, Webinator was Rebecca's doctoral thesis, and I was one of the case studies. So I've been using Webinator forever, and it is one of my favorite tools, and all of my students end up using it and loving it. So it's a lot more stable than it used to be, a lot easier to use than it used to be. I highly recommend Webinator, especially if you're dealing anything with time scale data. Linda, any favorite tools recently?
Sonic Pi.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I work with, as someone who doesn't really code, isn't good at maths, you know, having an accessible coding platform to work with sound is really, really helpful. And because it's built for children, you know, there is a user design interface that works for me. And because I know a lot of students I've worked with in sound design feel that coming into computational arts is a huge barrier, that they're already, you know, there's already, for a lot of my students, especially the majority of my students are female, there's already this sense that computational arts is not part of their future. So trying to introduce them to very, you know, sort of basic applications that help them engage with sound in this way has actually been really, really useful. And I created an online I created an online tutorial
Like the Raspberry
session in the Women in Sound, Women on Sound website.
No E, like like the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, so for anybody who's interested in Sonic Pi, there's online video tutorials on the Women in Sound, Women on Sound website where I do an introduction for making sounds. And of all the video tutorials we have on our website, that is the most today. Yeah, I've made this years ago and it's still the most watched for a very basic introduction to coding for sound.
What was that website again, Linda?
Wiswas.com,
Okay,
WISWOS.com.
Oh, yeah.
And that's women in sound.
Women on Sound.
Women on sound and in preposition. Women preposition sound.
Step forward. Okay.
No, I met Linda through Frida. That's
No,
the person I think I met.
All right, all of you, let's go.
Simmer down is what
Let's
Meg's
go
saying.
let's go this way for this question. So this is addressed to each of you in turn, another one of those. How do you envision the future relationship between AI and human artists in the realm of creative expression?
Right, so, well, this is an interesting one that I've been asking people of late. In fact, this is a question I've been asking a lot of people of late for various reasons. And I have been asked this question myself. And I guess, you know, the first response is how far into the future right? In the first instance, like, are we talking 10 years or 50 years or 100 years into the future? Because I think if we go very far ahead, I don't understand the relationship between AI and human artists. I don't understand why an actual true artificial intelligence will want to work with us in the very far distant future. I think if we're talking very early, right now, what I hear from my teachers, my educators in relation to sound is activated. It's like a huge word, is, you know, get the students in to kind of decode and deconstruct and, you know, rethink and redesign and take it for their own. All right. So it's sort of, yeah, something comes out and everybody says, this is how you use it, you know, and then you can manipulate a little bit, but in fact, you know, go in and take it apart and do with it something creative. And I'm already hearing from folks here, that's already what you do. And that's the thing that we want to keep encouraging artists, human artists, to do with these technologies, is be a part of it. Don't be a part of it, be at one. No, but you know what I mean? But continue kind of being, breaking the code. Okay, that sounds right. But you know, do that. And again, I hear you guys are doing that. So that's exciting.
Rebecca, if you've forgotten the question, it's up.
Yes, thank
on
you.
the screen.
Right there.
I know it's also on your papers,
Sure.
but because Rose is very organized.
Thanks, Rose. So I think there's a lot of different, first of all, there's many possible futures here, and I feel like those of us who are engaged in AI and creative practice do have a responsibility to try to push for a future in which it's not this dystopian, you know, 3 companies own all the models and push hard to automate any kind of process that might be automated in a crappy way instead of papers, right? That is possible. I think we need to be engaged as researchers, as people calling for policy and IP protection and so on. So that is, as you know, there's as little possibility of that as we can get. But then what do we want instead? I think there's this really amazing diverse set of ways that AI can be useful and will be useful. And I don't want to say that AI is just another set of tools that people will use, like we use Photoshop and digital audio workstations. I think, yes, AI will be those things. It will give us tools that make a lot of mundane tasks easier and faster, for instance. But also it's going to be other things. And, you know, I mentioned before, one of the things that excites me is the potential changes in how people work with technologies in creative processes. I also don't think that we're anywhere near AI being the sort of super intelligence that we interact with the same way that we would interact with a person or a really intelligent creative person. Some systems are going to mimic that, and I think there's interesting creative potential there, but I think it's a messier landscape in which AI can in some cases act like a teacher and help people learn. In some cases, I've seen artists describe AI as some sort of like funhouse mirror that reflects your own work back in a way that gets you to think about yourself differently. AI has the potential to change the sorts of things we spend our time on in creative work, and get us to think differently about ourselves. And there's a whole mess of possibilities there.
Nick?
Yeah.
Utopian Nick?
Yeah, I'm not really utopian. I kind of found myself being utopian, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But you have to.
Ask the AI how.
Yeah. I suppose I would say that I feel positive that there will be people working with these tools that are doing great things. I guess that's what I meant by that. And I think that expecting these tools to be creative is the wrong way to go about that. Because I think there's a guy called Christoph Koch who he said an amazing thing on a podcast I heard. He's a brilliant scientist and expert in consciousness and simulation of consciousness. And he said, thing about simulation, he says it in this kind of like quite, what's the word? Confident manner. He said, thing you got to know about consciousness, is it's like simulating anything else. When you simulate the weather and it rains, you don't get wet. And I think that's a really interesting sort of really interesting way of thinking about it, like it's not really happening. And creativity is not happening in creative AI. That you're not synthesizing a really creative thing. You're sort of making a small model and it's doing some stuff. I reckon that people will just get into it that way. I think they already are just getting into it that way. And that will be positive. And the more people feel like they are in control, the better the outcomes will be.
Great. And if you could write that person's name on the board while Phoenix answers this
Yeah,
question,
sure.
then Rose will type it into the chat and the circle will be complete.
I think it's spelled like this.
Go Phoenix, top
Oh,
one.
okay, all right. So I think that we're going about this all the wrong way. First of all, I would say that I want to walk it back to how our brains work and how we understand. So tools have a fundamental relationship with our cognition. And you can see this throughout human evolution. Every time we have a jump in technology, humans form new ways of consciously perceiving the world. And this is something you can see in our art. You can see us go from like flat to 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. You can see this in paintings, and you can see it in our literature. Our brains really change what they're able to perceive. So AI is a technology, and like any technology that humans have ever encountered, it's going to have a relational impact on how it changes our brains. You can see this most clearly with stone napping and the way our hands evolved to actually be able to nap stone. So I don't actually think
That's KNAPP, napping stone.
okay.
For those of you that have not read all the embodied cognition
Yes.
literature.
So I actually think that what's happening is that we're gonna have a new ability to understand and relate to the world, and asking someone without that evolution of consciousness, or who's gaining that evolution of consciousness while the technology is emerging, what the end result is going to be is actually just pretty short-sighted. Like, I don't think there's a way I can know what 100-year-old, AI is going to do to human consciousness. And by not having that knowledge, I'm very hesitant to make predictions about future relationships between AI and creativity, because I still think the cognition, which will form that relationship, is evolving at the present moment.
Yeah.
But do you not think that we would need, okay, so thinking of flip napping, that took thousands of years of evolution for us to evolve, physiologically as well as psychologically in tool using. But considering, I think some of us talked about this earlier, the speed at which digital technology has emerged and our relationship to it, will we actually evolve alongside it given how fast it's moving cognitively?
So I have a theory about this. If you look at the history of computing, we've been evolving computing for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's just been the slow grind. The first time it popped up was in Greece with the Antikythera machine. And we're slowly beginning to do this. And I think that we're at the beginning. I think it feels really fast to us right now because it's happening now. And yes, changes are happening quicker as technology evolves, but I still think there's going to be fundamental changes. And you were talking about it in your piece with editing animals' DNA, like editing the structure. We're going to be doing that to ourselves any second now, and people already are, like the biohackers with CRISPR are already doing the neural hacking. And we're going to see all kinds of stuff evolve with that in the next 100 years. So I just don't feel comfortable answering the question, because I really don't think that we can see where this is going with that stuff, because it's going to happen really, really fast. And it's going to change us. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, a really concrete example of this is recorded sound. We had the technological capacity to record sound long before someone made the conceptual leap to recording this ephemeral thing. And now our brains fully accept recorded sound. I mean, it's part of everybody's.
Yeah.
Is that why we accepted it so quickly when it emerged? From thinking of 16th century prints by that very famous European print artist who did that print called The Recording House. So yeah, I mean, perhaps you are totally correct. We have been thinking about computation or something like that for hundreds of years. Which is
what
why
does
it
now.
is such a shock to the system when it gets to the point where we can
Yeah.
move it out of the brain into an object that
Yeah.
can sort of take over.
Another really fascinating example to think about is the steam engine. The Greeks also developed a basic steam engine. They just didn't think to attach it to wheels. You know, like that those jumps are like, they're long times coming. It's that slow introduction that we've been having with this stuff for a very long time, I think.
There's a phrase in evolution called punctuated equilibrium.
Yes, that is exactly where
So
we're
we
at.
think that things are a ramp, but they're actually steps, and there are transition moments where a lot of things change all at once. But I think the ramp happens in the conscious, and the actual change happens at a significant moment in time. All right, as our final question, do you want 6 or 7? Vote panel and do not have a tie.
I don't see a 7 there.
Oh, 7 is the one that is, what steps can be taken to address Gen I in education and fine arts, or then we have the skills or steps.
I imagine that the students on this call would appreciate skills.
Skills?
Yeah,
We're good with skills, all right.
Students on the call, what do you think? Type in the chat, let us know.
skills or in steps.
Skills or steps, people, skills or steps. There's no students on the call. Skills, all right. All right,
Okay,
skills. We're mixing things up. Let's go this way. So Rebecca, Phoenix, Linda.
All right, so what skills should art students develop to thrive in an increasingly AI-influenced artistic landscape? I think, yes, getting your hands dirty with the latest AI technology and getting a working understanding of like, what is this doing, even if it's not something that you want to use in your own practice. I don't think everybody should want to use things in their own practice. But I think it is important to really understand what are the capabilities, what are the limitations of these, and then to pair that with a little bit of high-level technical understanding of what machine learning is doing. I think you can take a couple hours and learn some really important stuff about what machine learning is, because the AI everybody's talking about right now is really machine learning. You don't need to know math, you don't need to be a programmer, but to get your head around the fact that really this is just a bunch of infrastructure for looking at patterns in data and being able to reproduce those patterns. I think really letting it sink in that these aren't intelligent, right? There's not intelligence here. It's cool, but you know, and then I think pairing that with an awareness of the ethical landscape, the policy landscape, the legal landscape, because that, you know, there's huge implications for what the jobs market is going to look like for arts students and creators in the next decade. And I think, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I think that's absolutely right. I would say that a little addition, which is, if you think about other technological art forms, like photography or filmmaking, when computers sort of became more commonly used and usable for those kinds of, for that kind of practice in the, you know, I guess like throughout the 90s and 2000s, I was a bit disappointed because although I was into it, I kind of, I felt sad that the engineering craft was becoming less and less important, because I enjoyed that as a creative practitioner. I enjoyed the engineering, being close to the machine. Maybe that says more about me, I don't know, but that was where the things that I found interesting kind of came from. And I think that's the same with this art form. You know, so I think actually more than anything, generative AI is a medium. And I think it has a, you know, I think it's a medium before it's anything else. And so it's a really nice idea, I think, to spend time with that medium as material in the same way you would with anything else. So I'd say just do that.
Great. I have some thoughts about this that I think are really relevant to students. The biggest being, you should figure out how to interview with this stuff. So my students are finding that they're being interviewed by AI bots before they're getting in the room. And I think understanding how to, you know, what everything Rebecca said is really critical, because you need to work out how to reply to these AI systems so you can get into an interview. And I think that that is the most shocking bit to me, is seeing students come out and find themselves, particularly the ones coming out in coding, they're getting asked to be, interviewed by AI bots before they get to a recruiter. And that's really shocking to me. And I think that's going to be a skill all in of itself, how to actually have conversations with these bots to get you jobs. And that actually shocked me. It happened last year to a bunch of the MSc students. Google is now using a bot to interview people before they get to the next round. And that's a big deal.
Yeah. And as a person who really has been researching interdisciplinary education, helping interdisciplinary students tailor their resumes to get through the resume screening bot so that it knows your skill set, because you don't fit a perfect box, has been something I've been working on here with our career center.
Yeah, and because you guys know that these models, they're just repeating the data set, the hack here is to go figure out the data set. They're probably scanning LinkedIn to get these resumes. Go to those resumes, go to those websites, pick out the keywords, make sure to say them. Like you're gonna need to like get past some sort of scoring mechanism in this AI bot. So you're gonna need to really understand the data set these bots are being built on.
And so, Paul, I would say, yeah, being yourself is not enough. You have to know how to express being yourself to the bot. It's a slightly different skill set. Yeah. Oh, I love that, Alyssa. Using VR to do simulated interviews with students. Yep, it's a good way to practice. I practice doing interviews with ChatGPT a lot.
Yeah, practice doing your interviews with ChatGPT. Go to Bard. If you're applying to Google, ask Bard. Start using these companies' own AIs to ask them to help you. So then when you get interviewed by what is inevitably Bard on the back end, right? You had a chat with Bard about what it wants you to say.
Networking.
Network with Bard. Go have a day.
So Linda, just to remind you, because it's off the screen, do you have your question 6 in front of you, or do you want me to reread it?
No, I see it. I
The
mean,
skills.
to be honest with you, I don't really know what to add beyond what has already been said. As I said, I'm not an AI expert, so I engage with the tools, and I can only speak to the fact that I keep talking to my ChatGPT to understand how it is interpreting the information that I share with it. And it's sort of just giving me a glimpse into how these technologies are summarizing our world, and then critiquing that summarization, or trying to influence the non-thinking machine, right, to understand and interpret ideas in different ways. I feel that I am a student myself in the landscape of AI, and I don't actually want to be taught by this machine. I want to actually find a way to teach this machine myself. And so my starting point is I have been engaging with ChatGPT on feminist theory and race theory, and writings on it, and having conversations and arguments about its understanding of certain thoughts and concepts by writers I've been informed by. And I have been having an ongoing conversation about some pretty important subject matters to me. And so the very first time I engaged with ChatGPT, I was intimidated by this technology, and now I'm not at all. It's nothing. It's just I think of it as a tool. It is a new tool, and I don't want it to teach me. I want to teach it. So yeah,
That's great. There on April 15th, and I'll give this link to Rose to add, but there was an article called AI Index State of the AI in 13 charts. So this is in response to Paul asking about getting these tools to nonprofits in low income areas around the world. And basically, to train these huge models is really computationally and monetarily expensive. And the US is dominating, prices are skyrocketing, but the good news is open source models are growing. So I think that is going to be very helpful for making sure that we can give access to this new technology to students throughout the world who will then change the tool because of their impact. So Any final thoughts from the crew?
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And we appreciate your feedback. It's on the screen right now, but we'll also email you guys a follow-up with all the resources as well. Thank you guys. It's really nice. I'm gonna stop recording.
And I'll send that to you right now, so you just add it to the.
Are we off screen?